Hello, welcome. My name is George Pickering and I'm a member of IATEFL, the International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language. And it's my very great pleasure to lead this discussion about how to create effective branches in teacher associations. Before I start my talk, I'd like to say a big thank you to the British Council Senegal for organising these seminars and for all their work they do in the region to promote the development of teacher associations. This talk, along with other talks, has been specially designed for teacher associations in the area, many of whom are at an early stage in their development. And today we're going to talk about a topic which I know is relevant to many of them. This is how do you establish effective branches or chapters. We're going to organise this talk by looking at some key questions. These are, firstly, what is a chapter or a branch? Secondly, why have branches in a teacher association? Thirdly, what are the key principles for establishing effective chapters? Fourthly, how do you set up a new branch or chapter? And finally, do you pass the branch checklist? This will be a checklist which will help you to establish whether or not any current chapter is actually working as effectively as it might. And as you've probably noticed already, I'm going to use the terms chapter and branch interchangeably throughout this talk. So, question number one. What is a TA branch? Well, a TA branch is part of a TA set up in a particular town, city or region to provide training, developmental, social and networking opportunities to each teacher in a specific area. Historically, many teacher associations are established in the capital city. This means that certain teachers gain advantages from the TA, but many of the teachers in the outer regions of any particular country don't get the same exposure to TAs. So why have branches? A question that I've already started to answer. Well, firstly, they help teacher associations, they help TAs achieve their mission of reaching teachers throughout a particular country. Secondly, they help to increase the membership of TAs. Thirdly, they increase the pool of TA leadership volunteers. Giving lots of people the opportunity to manage branches means that these people could also possibly step up to the national level of the TA. And lastly, they ensure that TA activities are relevant to teachers in diverse social and cultural contexts. In other words, the contexts within which teachers operate vary, and through establishing branches, we can make sure as much as possible that what we are providing in those branches are meeting the needs of the local teachers of that particular region. So, the first essential for any branch is to have clear purpose and aims. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." And the first thing to capture in any particular branch is a clear sense of purpose, a clear sense of what we are here to do. A clear question to the answer, what is our mission? What is our mission? And secondly, to be able to say, what are we going to do and what are we not going to do? Because every branch of every TA has limited resources available to it. So a key question running from the mission is to turn the mission into specific activities that we can accomplish for local teachers. The second key essential for having an effective branch is a core leadership group. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." The key thing here is that a group of people have a sense of who they are, and there's also a sense of what functions they need to cover. The biggest danger, or one of the biggest dangers of a branch, is that a branch becomes associated with a single individual. In order to have a fully functioning branch, you need to cover some essential functions. So what is the minimum number? Well, for example, you might want to think in terms of a president and a vice president, someone responsible for finance, a membership and marketing person, an events coordinator, and if you're going to provide a newsletter, some kind of newsletter editor. So in other words, first thought seems to be, what are the functions we need to cover? How many people do we need to have a properly functioning team? The third point is that you need to have a team approach. Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. A key ingredient to an effective branch is a group of people working together to a common aim. It's been said before, but the letters team stand for together everyone achieves more. So far we need a mission, we also need a leadership team, and we need a team who are going to work together towards common aims. The fourth thing that we need is a strategy based on needs. And when we say needs, we mean the needs of the local teachers. So we need to answer some basic questions. Firstly, what is the current situation for local teachers? What do these teachers need? What contribution can we make to meeting their needs? What opportunities are available to us? What are the key projects that we need to carry out now? So having decided upon our strategy based upon the needs of local teachers, the next thing we need is an effective communication strategy, which helps us to reach those teachers with our messages. So the sorts of questions we need to ask are, how are we going to communicate with our members? What's the best way of reaching them? Is it through texting? Is it through email? Is it through website? Etc., etc., etc. The next question is, how are we going to inform them of our existence and activities? How are we going to get feedback from them to make sure that communication is a two-way process? And also, how are we going to communicate with other stakeholders, for example, sponsors? The next thing we need is an appropriate funding model, and this will vary from context to context. In other words, how are we going to get the funds, how are we going to get the income we need to run our branch? So where are we going to get our funds and resources from? Are we going to get it through membership fees? Are we going to get it through surpluses that we make on events that we run? Are we going to get it through sponsorship? So in different contexts, we need to be able to come up with a funding model that is appropriate for local conditions. The next thing we need is effective action plans. We need to take our dreams, we need to take our aims, and we need to turn them into effective action plans, which means we need to assign responsibilities for particular tasks and responsibilities to specific people with clear completion dates. We need to be able to answer the basic questions: who's going to do what, with what, and by when. Having established a teacher association branch, we need to be able to carry out a proper evaluation of our effectiveness. We need to know from an early stage how we're going to evaluate the effectiveness of the branch. And we will come back to this question a bit later. We need to be able to say what has worked well in a particular time and what do we need to improve on. The ninth essential for an effective TA branch is effective relations with the rest of the teacher association. So possibly we might be part of meetings of all the branches at the annual conference of the teacher association. We might write an annual report to the central office of the teacher association, and we might also be involved in networking with other branches so that we can share best practices. The final key ingredient for an effective TA branch is to make sure that the branch has regular activities. That is to say, firstly, that the people who are running the branch meet regularly and that they communicate with each other and with the members on a regular basis. We need to be running regular training events, and it's a good idea for branches to establish at an early stage in their development how many training events they can realistically put on in any time period, for example, a year. They need to think about the social side of a branch. How many activities can we put on that bring teachers together, not just to learn more about teaching, but to be part of a network of teachers helping each other solve and face common problems and dilemmas. And if we're going to provide newsletters, once again, it's good to establish practices as to how many newsletters we can realistically put on over, for example, a year. So, we've talked a little bit about the essentials that you need to have in place to run an effective TA branch. I've turned those essentials into questions to create what I call the branch checklist. So while I pause for breath, and perhaps you pause for thought, just think about those questions. If you have already established a branch, to what extent do you meet the points on that checklist? To what extent do you have a clear purpose? Do you have a core leadership team? Does that leadership team adopt a team approach? Do you have a clear strategy that's based on the needs of local teachers? Do you have a clear strategy for communicating with your members and other groups? Do you have an appropriate funding model for your context? Do you have effective action plans? Do you know how you're going to evaluate your activities? How you're going to evaluate the effectiveness of your branch? To what extent do you have effective relations with the rest of the teacher association? And lastly, do you run regular activities? In other words, do you run 2 or 3 events each calendar year or each term? And having thought about that checklist, what could you possibly do differently in the future? Now, some of you watching this seminar have already set up branches, and some of you perhaps are on the point of setting up a branch. So the next couple of slides are all about things to consider when you are setting up a new branch. There are also things that a central TA might consider when they're thinking of the advice they might give to a group of people who want to set up a TA branch. The first point is that the central TA should be able to provide information to potential branch volunteer leaders about possible branch aims and activities. The second thing is, as we said earlier on, the importance of creating a leadership group. In other words, to make sure you have a group of people rather than solitary individuals who are setting about the task of creating the TA branch. The third thing is to provide training and guidance to the leadership group. And one of the ways that this can be facilitated is through providing those people with a branch handbook. The fourth thing is to hold a signature event to launch the branch and find out more about the needs of local teachers. The fifth thing is to create a branch action plan. So in other words, to go beyond the signature event and to make sure that the new TA branch has a clear plan for their first year of operation, in which they know how many activities they want to put on and how frequently the leadership group is going to meet. The sixth point is to embed the procedures and services of the branch. In other words, at the beginning of any branch, at the beginning of any TA, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of motivation around. So the first event goes well, the second event goes well. What you need to do is to make sure that the TA branch is going to be there for the long haul. So you need to think about turning events and activities into procedures and services that become kind of institutionalized at the local level, so that the TA branch continues to flourish after the initial enthusiasm perhaps has somewhat waned. The seventh point is to monitor the effectiveness of the branch. I think it's particularly important that everybody has some clear indicators of what would lead to us considering a TA branch to be effective. The kinds of things I'm talking about are number of members. Is membership going up? Is membership increasing or decreasing from one time period to another? How many events has the TA put on? And finally, are there any mechanisms for the TA branch obtaining feedback from its members? What I've tried to do in this talk is emphasize what I think are some of the key essentials for establishing and sustaining TA branches. If you want to read further in this area, you might want to have a look at the book called Running an Association for Language Teachers, which is edited by Susanna Gomez and is published by IATEFL and the British Council. You may be able to get hold of a physical copy, but if you can't, you can download it from the British Council's Teaching English website. We've talked about action plans and their importance as far as teacher associations are concerned. I'd just like you to spend a moment now thinking about what we have discussed over the short period of time of this seminar, and to think about what are perhaps some of the things you could do differently in the future to make your TA branches even more effective. I'd like to end with a simple quote from Edmund Burke, who said, "No man made a bigger mistake than he who did nothing because he could do only a little." If we work together and if we happen to create one new teacher association branch, we manage to reach a pool of teachers who perhaps without our help would not be getting the support and development that they need. That's why I'm so passionate about TA branches, and that's why I hope this seminar has helped you in terms of you developing your own TA branches. Thank you.